So we have a very special guest on today's podcast. We have a studio owner, audio engineer, and my first employer. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Simon Petraki.
Hi, John.
How's it going, Simon?
Good. How are you?
Very good.
Good.
So I wanted to start off the podcast with, I want to start off by going from the very beginning of your career and then sort of like working our way chronologically until where you are now.
Okay.
So before you started Seratone,
Yeah.
you went to Recording Arts Canada. Is that right? You did
Exactly.
RAC.
Yeah.
You graduated as an audio engineer, and then you decided to start your own recording studio. Is that more or less the timeline?
That's more or less the timeline. Yeah. And I think the date would have been around 2008 or 8 when I finished at Recording Arts Canada.
All right.
Yeah.
And you started Seratone. I checked your Instagram yesterday in 2010.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I remember you mentioning to me that in those 2 years, you went to, I think, a bank and you got a loan to start your recording studio.
Exactly. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how you went about getting this loan and finding a space and investing into this recording studio that you eventually called Seratone?
For sure. For sure. So I knew that I needed about 10 to 20 grand to do the bare minimum, because obviously studios can be built with 100 grand, 200 grand. You know, Brad Pitt just built one in France for, I'm sure, a couple million.
A recording studio?
It's crazy, actually. I got to tell you about it. But anyway, this was nothing like that. Obviously, I found a beat up old commercial space that it was an insane deal. It was about $1,500 a month for 3,000 square feet. Actually, they threw me a surprise, and I had to pay the taxes at the end of the year. So I got this $4,000 bill at the end of the year to deal with. But all in all, great deal. So I did the math on what construction materials would cost, and I figured roughly between 10 and 20. So the banks like giving loans usually because it means interest, and so it wasn't
They make some money.
Yeah, it wasn't too tough to get $15K. I didn't have a whole lot of savings, but I definitely had some. I'd been working in restaurants for a few years before that, and so with that $15K, a lot of it went into building materials. So, the rock wool fiber in the walls, the gyprock, the wood. Actually, I used a lot of metal studs because they were actually cheaper.
Did you do a lot of the renovating yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I did it all, and with some friends that came around.
Did you have construction experience before that?
A bit.
Okay.
A bit. Just minor stuff. So a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of, asking people what to do and a lot of staring at the walls, just scratching my head, and then it comes to you.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my experience of the studio that we gave up back in February.
Yeah.
I had no construction experience whatsoever, and I had a friend come out to help do some of the work, and I learned a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes too.
Yeah.
It's not easy. For sure.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
There's definitely frustrating moments. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it feels good at the end, right? Because you end up having that extra little bit of pride behind it because, you put it together. And I'm sure if we were super rich, we would just, get people to do it. And, you can do away with the pride at that point. But no, it's a matter of saving money too, because contractors are crazy expensive, especially these days. I think since...
doubled in price.
It's doubled in price in the past few years. Yeah. So, it's a matter of necessity, right?
Yeah, for sure. Did you do any audio work outside of Seratone?
Yeah, I interned at MixArt, which is a really nice studio. Yeah. So I was more of a fly on the wall than an actual hands-on. I didn't do any hands-on really. There was the occasional time when I touched a fader.
Right. Yeah.
But it wasn't actually, it was more for just nobody's looking. Let me touch the fader.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I think that,
get your hands dirty a little bit.
Yeah. That's it. But I didn't have any real studio experience, before building Seratone in Griffintown, I was in NDG. And actually, Seratone started a year and a half before that in the basement of this apartment I was living in with a roommate. And the basement was just kind of semi-finished. And I that's actually really where I learned stuff. And it was official. You know, I had a little light box with Seratone sign on it in the basement, and I had paying clients that were coming by, and that was mainly hip hop. But I actually had this one Turkish fellow who lived around the block, and I met him at the bus stop, and he had some funky instrument that I forget the name of now, but it's this Turkish little 4-string guitar. I did his album, and that was a really, really great experience. And that got me to have the confidence to think bigger. So yeah, I encourage people to set up in their apartments, set up, you know, wherever you can. And even if you're charging people, that's fine. You know, your skills are valuable.
Yeah,
for sure.
You're providing a service.
Absolutely.
And you can, I mean, I also did a lot of audio mixing in my mom's apartment back when I used to live in my mom's apartment,
which was close by, right?
Wasn't it? Exactly. Yeah. So you know what? This is the perfect time to talk about the fact that you were my first employer.
Nice.
So let me tell the audience this story. I was between my first and second year of my master's, and I remember it was summer. Summer had just started, and I was sort of just like lying in bed I grabbed my laptop, and I'm like, I should probably send out some resumes. And I had my resume typed out, and I just started cold emailing different studios, whatever I was able to find on Google Maps. I emailed probably like 5 studios. I didn't even get that far. Yours was one of the first that I emailed. And I kid you guys not, like 5 minutes later, I get a call from Simon being like, hey man, are you free tonight?
No way.
It was something like that. And I was like, yeah, totally. And I just walked over, and you told me that the reason why you hired me for, it was primarily audiobook editing and maybe some audiobook recording at the time, was because I lived nearby, and you saw my address on my resume.
Exactly. Super convenient for both of us.
Yeah. And of course you saw that I had some experience. And
for sure.
So you saw the experience, you saw my address, which is why I always tell people, one of my students recently, they're like, never put your address on your...
Look at how it worked out for you.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, to be honest, like, I think it depends.
Yeah.
I think if you're near your employer, they might actually really enjoy knowing that you're nearby. Because if there's ever like a fire, not like a literal fire, but if there's ever something that happens and you need to be there quick, like you can be the person that saves the day.
First responder.
Yeah. First responder.
Yeah, for sure. That's a plus.
Yeah.
And I have a recollection. My memory's not great, but so we're going back how many years now? We're going back, did we say 6-7 years?
Yeah, 2017.
Yeah. So 7 years back. Yeah. I remember getting the email, reading it, and I don't usually read these emails so immediately. I put them into an intern kind of category in my Gmail, and then I get to it when I can, if I can. But yours came in at a serendipitous moment. Opened it up, read it, and got a good vibe from it too, because I think that it's also just a matter of how you sold yourself. You wrote it in a way that wasn't asking for too much, but you weren't selling yourself too much. It was just right. So I called you up, and then you came by that night.
I came by. I don't think you had any work for me that night, but you wanted me to come and show me around and ask and sort of like test me. I think you got me on Pro Tools and just like sort of asked me to do some very basic things like zoom in and zoom out and like, can you play this? And
and you knew.
Yeah, and I knew the shortcuts, the basics. And I remember feeling very nervous at the time because my chops were fine, but that's all they were. Yeah. And this was like a real recording studio. And I was like, oh my God.
Were your chops on Mac or were they on PC? Because
they were on Mac.
They were. So that's another thing that probably had you sweating a little bit. You're like, why is this not working?
Yeah, exactly. And no matter like how good of an audio engineer you are, if you go into a recording studio that's not where you're used to, it feels like a completely different software.
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking.
And especially like plugging things into like the patch bay and knowing like what preamps they go to. It's so different in every studio. I remember feeling comfortable at Seratone, and I was like, okay, I get like these, because it's all hardwired, or it used to be before, right?
It is. Yeah. Well, it's not a board, so it's just a bunch of preamps that I've collected and selected, and they are used for certain things. You know, these are my main two vocal preamps. You know, this one's really good on kick drum. This one's great on bass, and so I've kind of selected them in that way. But yeah, they're hardwired in the sense that they're you know, the input one is this, input two is that.
Yeah, exactly.
So the learning curve wasn't crazy for you, right?
No, not at all. But I do remember feeling very nervous, and but it worked out well, and I feel like having that experience was very important to be able to like work in a professional environment and like come in, clock out, have the real sort of like studio experience.
For sure.
It was definitely invaluable.
Yeah, well, your help was invaluable. It came at a really good time too, because the audiobook stuff was picking up. I needed a hand with that, and then you also were partaking in band sessions as well, right? We did a few of those together.
We did a few of them together, and I also brought in a client once, the Broke Diplomats, if you remember those guys.
Yes, for sure.
And we recorded their album, I think, pretty much entirely at Seratone. Now I'm forgetting. Maybe I might have done a session at McGill at one point, but that was very fun as well. And mixing in that control room, it's a good sounding room.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So you got a $15,000 loan, primarily used towards renovation, building materials.
Right.
What was your first purchase, like audio wise? What was your first audio interface and a couple of microphones? Because I'm sure you didn't have the collection that you now have at the very beginning.
No, I had, I want to say 4 mics, and I needed more to be able to record mainly drums, right? Because that's the only thing that really necessitates, a dozen mics or so. So I scoured Kijiji and Craigslist back when Craigslist was a thing. And it was it was a matter of just finding deals. I think the universe conspired, because there were some really good deals, and there were 2 deals I found where it was a person who was getting rid of a bunch of stuff. Either, you know, an older fella who just decided he doesn't want to do this anymore, or what was the other one? The other one was actually, I was at a pub in NDG, and, you know, it's 3 a.m., the lights go on, and there's this super drunk dude at a table, and my age, but he's there, and he's just doing some kind of drum beat on the table or whatever. And as I walked by, I said something about, you know, it's just a shuffle. He's like, yeah, man, what Led Zeppelin song is it? Fool in the Rain or whatever. We got on to talking, and then he drunkenly offered to sell me all of his preamps and even a couple microphones for a crazy deal. And so I said, can I hold you this? Like, I'm going to call you tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, for sure. So I went over the next day, and I acquired for $2,000 some great preamps. Like, I think there were 5 preamps, all universal audio.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a few mics. Anyway, so some deals came my way. All that to say that I equipped myself for fairly cheap. And that's, that was the beginning. But I had just enough. There was I think I had a dozen microphones, and so it couldn't be, I don't even think, what did I have? I had a bare bone, the first kind of interface that I invested in, I'm just trying to remember the name of it, but it was an automated fader, all-in-one M audio unit. And I can't recall the name. But anyway, that's one thing that I bought new and I invested in, and that had, I can't remember how many pre's it had. It actually might have only had 8, but that was my
and it was a controller and an interface and a preamp.
Exactly,
and
all that, all in one kind of thing, and it was good enough. At that point, I think I was charging $35 an hour, so I don't think I was attracting people who were looking for state of the art sound. So yeah, that was the beginning setup. It was just enough mics and preamps. Actually, no, those preamps I jumped forward. Those were later on. At the beginning, it was just that M audio board. Yeah.
I don't know if you have this information off the top of your head, but do you sort of know how long it took for Seratone to become profitable? Because you had to put that upfront investment.
Yeah. How long did it take to pay back that loan?
Yeah.
I think it took probably 2 years, because obviously I was in those first 2 years needing to live, and obviously, as you understand, we see gear that we want, and sometimes even if we can't technically afford it, we buy it. And so it took me a couple of years. It must have been 2-3 years, and then I was at that kind of more break-even point. And then was it that long? Yeah, it's probably around that. Let's say 3 years.
One of the things that I personally know from my experience of working as an audio engineer is that at least these days, a lot of artists can do recordings at home, right? So like guitars or basses or synths or even vocals, you can get like, I would say like 80% of the way in a home studio. So did you find back in 2010 that you were primarily getting bands to record like the drums, and then they would want to still do a lot of stuff at home, or how did that work?
I found that people wanted the studio experience, so it was pretty cheap. It was $30-$35 an hour. I can't remember exactly at the beginning. And so for somebody to come into a space that's, high ceilings, pretty big live room, it was super affordable for a studio experience. Sure, you weren't getting, Neve or SSL kind of crazy sound, but people, I think it was about the experience. I think it still is about the experience, but certainly over the past 3-4 years, I've seen it since people were in lockdown mode. I find they really just invested in getting things so they could do everything themselves. Back then, I mean, I say back then like it was that long ago, but it was almost 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, substantial.
Things change. And so I'm pretty sure people were into the more of the coming to record a project, an album kind of thing. And so I got a few of those, but I think 70% at that time was like hip hop. I was doing a lot of hip hop recording, some singer-songwriter stuff. But I feel like a lot of studios cut their teeth on hip hop artists because it's fairly easy. It's like one mic. You don't have to make it sound so crazy. It's just put a little bit of effects on it, and it's there.
Compress it.
Yeah.
So when you first got the studio started, were you primarily working with artists, or were you already doing some corporate contracts?
The corporate came later.
Okay.
I had 1 or 2 clients that sent me some voiceover work. It wasn't until probably 4 or 5 years into it that I really started getting regular voiceover stuff. Audiobooks only started, let's say, halfway through. So I want to say sometime around 2016. And then, so it was, I'd say, mainly artists nice. For sure. In the beginning, it was almost fully artists. And before I said it was maybe 60-70% hip hop. I think it was maybe half. It was to be more accurate. Yeah. So it was a matter of word of mouth too. I didn't have, my first website was on a platform called Bandzoogle. And so they're still around now, and I think they're doing pretty well. They are website it's a kind of DIY website type of platform that's geared towards artists and bands. So you have, all kinds of integrated music players and this and that. And anyway, things geared towards that. And it also has a community, like an online community where you can be reaching out to people. It was actually pretty helpful for me. A few people found out about me that way. I actually had a big contract. One of my first big album contracts came through this guy from Indiana who was on Bandzoogle. Yeah, he had his website on Bandzoogle as well. And he's like a 40-year-old, maybe 45-year-old guy who he ran into some money. Both of his parents had passed away that year. And so he decided, I need to write these songs. He had also, come into some like really tough life, hurdles. And so he just kind of quit his job, uprooted things, and he came up there. But that was through Bandzoogle. So it was, it was nice to have that extra. There's word of mouth, and then there's this kind of extended marketing thing that was happening. So yeah, I'm not very good at marketing. I don't like it.
I feel like you have a good internet presence though, from what I saw on your website and Instagram and Facebook.
It's just updating things. I'm not always as on it as, I don't know. It's tough to say it as I should be. I don't know what is the right amount. Some people are annoyed by people who post too much. I think I definitely fall on the short side of, keeping updated. But one thing I've found is that I don't want to get caught up into making a post for every client that comes through, right?
Yeah.
Then it's, if you forget somebody, then they'll be like, why didn't you post about me?
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez, it's not personal. I'm just lazy.
Yeah. So now, if we fast forward to 2023, which is the year that we currently are.
Yes, present day.
Yeah, present day. If you were to draw a pie chart of Seratone's income as it relates to the different type of work that you do.
Yep.
Like let's say like singer-songwriter, hip-hop, corporate. Do you do remote work outside of the studio?
No, I'm going to start.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's part of the plan for this year is to get set up.
All right. So what would that pie chart look like?
It's a good question. I think, I'd say the pie chart would be at this point in time, a quarter audiobooks, a quarter corporate voiceover, and half music. And out of that half music, I'd say it's equal parts 33 of hip hop, singer-songwriter, and bands.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's fairly accurate. It fluctuates, obviously. But yeah,
For
on
sure.
average.
And do you think, because you run an independent studio, I would say that there aren't that many in Montreal, but maybe I'm just not in the loop. There are a few, from what I know, there's Seratone, there's Freak Shop as well. If you know Freak Shop, it's run by
Freak Shop's
Dave.
great. Yeah.
And I'm forgetting
Derek. Yeah.
Dave and Derek.
Yeah, great guys.
Great guys as well. Do you think it's sort of necessary in this day and age to work audiobooks and corporate contracts in order to survive as a studio?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think it boils down to my lack of marketing. And like we were talking about before, I'm just not that much of a marketing hustler. I used to have more of that hunger back in the day. I was hitting up shows with my business cards. I was going up to bands after they got off stage. And I got some clients that way. And I feel like it's a really personal, organic way to do it. But I've lost that hunger in a way too. And I think, for instance, we were just talking about Freak Shop. I don't know, but I think they probably do less corporate than I do. I see them post quite often. It's very music centric, I feel. Sudwest Recording as well, which is another big independent one down in my area. I feel like they focus a lot on music as well. I think it's mainly because I've been doing less of that kind of marketing, less of that going out. So naturally, these gigs have just come to me through my website, because I also have Google AdWords campaigns going on, and those are attracting traffic from all kinds of people, be it corporate or music. So whatever comes my way, I take, and that's the entrepreneur's condition. You just don't say no, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you and I'm suffering these days because since I'm in this transition period where I'm closing down shop in Montreal, I'm saying no to a lot of people, and it's terrible.
I'm sure that must be rough.
But anyway, all that to say that I don't think it's necessary. It all depends on your marketing angle and your direction, your image, your branding.
But it is harder to get those artistic contracts, I guess, right? It takes more marketing work in order to get the the musicians to come in than it takes to get the companies, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's also a factor of how much you're in the scene. Because if I was in a band, like let's say the guys at Sudwest Recording, or if I was like Freak Shop as well, you know,
He's in the Damn Truth.
Dave's in
so,
the Damn
yeah,
Truth.
yeah.
It's huge. So there's a bit of, you know, your hands are, you're all in it. So you're mixing with people all the time. They know who you are. They want to be around that kind of scene as well, where there's a buzz of people who are in the scene. So I think that really does help keep the studio at a fully musical kind of direction, if that's what you want.
Right. Actually, since we're on this topic, I would like to talk to you a little bit about this, because this is something that I actually have a very hard time separating myself, is like the business and the art. Because sometimes, for example, with a video production gig, I might have a client that says like, we have this budget, but I like really like what they want to do with it. And so I decide to bring like double the amount of equipment because I have it. It's here, you know. Obviously, like I would want to be renting it out because I do need to cover the expense of having purchased the equipment, right? That makes sense. But I know in my head that if I put more effort into it, the product is going to be better and the product will get me more work.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that with a studio? Is that like, because with a studio, you pay like a rate and it includes everything at Seratone, right? Everything in Studio A, for example. But you might do that more on like the mixing front, or do you charge?
I don't charge per song. I charge per hour usually for mixing. And so with that said, but I struggle with that too, John, because I don't, maybe I should charge per song for mixing, because then it's just, you have your standard. And if people don't like the price, then it's well, too bad. But I think that any producer that wants to, and it's not necessarily producers, but anybody who really wants to have a standard of quality attached to their name, they need to, I think at one point in their career, make that step into, no, this is it. There's no more sliding scale. I won't give you a 1 hour mix. So I struggle with that. I still do sliding scale mixes. If people want a quick and dirty 1 hour mix or a 2 hour mix on a song that probably should have 4 or 5, I still offer it. Is that to my detriment? Maybe. If they're stamping my name on it and on social media and it has Seratone, you know, branded on it, it's definitely not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I haven't been as you know consistent as I should be, I think, in that sense. But guys got to eat too, you know. I don't want to scare off all my clients saying, no, this mix is going to cost you $400. Then they go somewhere else. I say, no, this mix is going to cost you, okay, what's your budget? Let's work with that. But to your point that you were saying before, we also need to have some integrity in our own work, and we're not just going to put out shit. So definitely there's been many a time that I put in extra work, even though it's unpaid. And it's just to make sure that it doesn't sound amateur.
For sure. Because that reflects on you.
Yeah. So I definitely, I find I'm in the busiest year of my life now, and it's crazy moving the studio and building the new one and all this stuff going on, that I don't have the time to overextend and work for free. It's understandable. So I think that at this point, I just I tell people, I'm at that stage now, I think. I tell people that this is what it's going to cost. If you don't like it, it's okay. There's plenty of other options, you know?
Yeah. And do you find now that you're drawing the line a little bit more clearly, do you find that you are losing out on certain contracts?
I find I am, yeah. And I think it's only natural, because I'm also saying no to a lot of people these days too, because I'm just not in town most of the time. I'm building the new space. So I've grown comfortable now with saying no, or saying this is my price and they say no, and you know, it's the reality of the current situation. So
yeah. So let's talk about the new space then. I'd
Sure.
like to, because you're leaving. You told me before the podcast, before everything was rolling,
Right.
that you have one more month in Seratone Studios, the one that is in Griffintown.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So, and you have your first client beginning of July. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, mid-July to mid-August. So it's an album that we'll be doing, and it's going to be what I built the place for. It's going to be people sleeping over. It's going to be a B&B kind of thing.
That was going to be actually one of my questions. Is you're going to have, so it's going to be like an experience. The artists go there. You have lodging for them.
Exactly.
This is a very loaded question. I hope you're ready to answer
I'm ready.
it. But how is your business model going to change? Because I feel like in the city, you probably have to pay, your rent is more expensive in the city. There's a lot of things that are more expensive in the city, whereas now Seratone is moving how far away from Montreal?
An hour and a half.
An hour and a half.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to get clients that are more invested for like longer term projects, I would imagine.
For sure.
But you also have to charge them, whether directly or indirectly, for the fact that they're staying at your studio. So can you just walk through the business model a little bit?
For sure. And I haven't hashed it out. I haven't hashed it out fully.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it's a matter of getting a few clients under my belt who have stayed there so that I understand, okay, this is how things should go. Should I include food? Should I have a whole bunch of frozen meals and, ready for supper? Should I just tell people BYOF? Does that make sense?
Yeah. yeah. Bring your own food. Yeah.
Or who knows, maybe things will get busy. Maybe fancy bands will come and I'll have a local caterer. I got to figure all those things out, but I will have my hourly rate, which will remain what it is. I will definitely try to get local people from around there who will be coming by for whatever it is, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But I think that hopefully a lot of people will come from Montreal for a full day, 2 days. If you come for a full day, sleepover is not included. If you do want to sleep over, there's probably going to be that element because I got to change the sheets. There's a matter of time as well. I have a 10-hour day rate here in Montreal, but when people leave after 10 hours, they leave. I've got my life back. When it's down there, if people are sleeping over, it's okay. No, it's 10 hours of recording's done.
Clock, right?
We're it's not that we're on the clock, but we're together, and that's fine. I'm sure I'll be enjoying most of those interactions, but it'll be. I really hope I don't get to a point where I regret having somebody over. But that's part of it, is that this is not going to be open to everybody. This is going to be based on referral or, a friend of a friend, but no 2 degrees of separation. Maybe that should be the new name of the studio, 1 Degree.
1 Degree
Studios. But yeah, I think that I have to rework my business model and my whole pricing plan, if you will. It's gotta fall into place, though. I don't really know what to expect yet. I'm in the process of thinking about a new website and how I'm going to brand myself, I guess, in a new way. But that's the whole thing, is that since this stay over experience is not for everybody, I think that I can't necessarily shop that on the website, right? So I got to be careful with it, because it's a slippery slope. You can get somebody who you don't know, and they want to come stay for a week, and then all of a sudden, they've prepaid and they have to stay there with you for a week, and yet you're fearing your safety. I don't know. Maybe they insist on having a gun under their pillow because they're afraid. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
I have no idea how this is going to go. So I just know that I have to be careful with how I market it, how I brand it. But yeah, there'll be day rates, including food and stay, and then there'll be day rates just like I have here in Montreal, which is just 10 hours, and then let's have a beer or whatever, and then
call it.
Ciao. Yeah.
Makes sense. Kayla, can we actually see some of the photos from the from the renovations. So I saw you posted something on, I think it was Instagram. You posted like a story where you walked through the new space. So this is, I don't want to call it an attic because it's not
There's an attic on top of it.
Oh, there's an attic. So this is the second floor.
So this is the second floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the second floor. And right now we're looking from the perspective of the control room into the live room.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how big is the space? Because it looks from this photo to be like double the size of Studio A.
No, it's I think that might be a perspective thing, but it's about the same. The control room here is a bit bigger.
Oh, wow.
A bit bigger. Not by much, but the whole room is more or less 40 by 20, which is not far from what I have now. And I've split it up into, I guess we could say 55, 45. So the control room's a little smaller. Live room's a little bit bigger. And then I've skewed the angles of walls a bit to make it less of a parallel surface kind of. But in this, so in the live room, I had to follow all the lines of the existing walls. And so this is a kind of a, I don't know if you know that when you put your iPhone into like 0.5 mode where it zooms out, it skews things. So that's actually a flat top ceiling where you see it almost looks like it's angled on the left. But so that's a flat top ceiling. And then you've got two angled exactly like this. So you got these two angles. I had to build the live room. I had to make the whole shape following the existing shape. So I built down from it with 2x4s, filled it all up with insulation, with Roxel, and then chip rock on top. But it's, on the other side, there were some really, really tricky angles. I don't know if I sent you a picture of the control room angles, but it's, it would have been a nightmare to get that structure just built off of. So I decided to leave all the ceiling as is, knowing that that was the attic and I'm going to be blowing in insulation into the attic.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's not necessarily for sound, but it's for heat loss and all that. So the attic, the control room, I mean, is not going to need to have the ceiling so soundproof, but the live room obviously does. If it's raining, you don't want to hear it on a tin roof beating down. So I really was blessed in Montreal to have this concrete, it's a cinder block kind of concrete building. So it was really good. And I was around all kinds of Garda trucks and all kinds of noise and downtown traffic. It was super quiet, and I'm happy I had it. I don't know how it'll be here. It's a small town. It's a quiet town.
Are you on a major road at all?
The thing is that I'm on the main road of this village, and I've got the town hall right in front of me, and I've got a park right in front of me next to the town hall. Cemetery behind me, so that's great. No noise there. And then my two side neighbors are far enough away that it's not a big deal at all. But I'm a little worried about these young kids with their cars with broken mufflers and their dirt bikes and whatnot that just gun it down that road. Even though it's a 30 or 40 kilometer an hour limit, there's nothing going on. So I was thinking about road spikes or building my own speed bump right in front of my place.
Yeah, to slow people down a little bit.
Right. Or maybe I'll get creative. No, I am not.
So is this the control room?
Yeah, this is the control room. Now on the left of that picture, you kind of see how there's a jutting out funky angle around. That's actually a window. Actually, it's also a jutting out funky angle over that window in the center. On that other shot. So this one too. So
see it,
so that's what I'm talking about. Building out from that would have been really complex. So I decided, okay, just insulate the exterior walls, which need insulation, because the whole house is uninsulated. I have to insulate the whole thing. So all the rooms eventually are going to get gutted from the inside and insulated. Yeah. But that's not for now.
Yeah, you're starting with the studio, and then I guess you're gonna be living in this house as well. And and once the studio starts actually like making money, you're gonna start going downstairs, I assume.
Well, so the house is, I mean, there have been, it's a 180-year-old house. There have been so many people that have lived there full time, but they had fireplaces in so many rooms, and they weren't worried. the guy who owned it before me, who was actually Brian Mulrooney's younger brother. You remember Brian Mulrooney? He was a Prime Minister of Canada. So
okay,
it was his younger brother, and it was one of his homes, but it was his country home, and it was his summer home. I mean, he didn't spend any winters there. So it was oil heating when I got the place. I converted that. The furnace is now electric, but yeah, it's a cold house in the winter, and I basically just crank the heat, but it all bleeds out.
of course,
So
yeah.
it's,
So it's an expensive
Hydro's
bill.
happy with me for these first few years, but I get them back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long have you been? When did you buy the house, and how long have you been doing renovations? Oh, that's a good picture of you.
I'm excited about the new accent wall. I bought some barnwood, so I've been putting it up. So I've had it for 2 years now, and there have been a lot of things to do before getting into the studio build. But the first thing was repairing the rot on the outside. So I had a contractor guy who knew what he was doing repair the rot, because there were, like holes in the house and animals were getting in and stuff. Okay. So I nipped that in the bud, and well, actually it wasn't a bud, it was like a full-blown tree at that point. So I got that taken care of. Then every window, and it's actually a big house. I had to do all the windows, and I changed all the windows. That was something I learned from that guy for the first one, and then I just did the rest of them myself. And so the ones on the second floor are a little freaky, because I'm up on like a 30-foot ladder on the outside, and somebody's passing me a window from the inside. Anyway, there's been some, and I'm not good with heights either. There's been a lot of work around it, but yeah, I'm learning as I go along too. Certain things are trickier than others, but it actually used to be a ballroom. So they used to have full-on balls in this on the second floor of the house. It was a bit of a guest house, actually. So there are 3 bedrooms upstairs, along with this ballroom, and so travelers passing through the town, would park their horses or whatever, and and they'd stay over. But I see ads, like old newspaper clippings. I got involved in a Facebook group from this area, and it's all about sharing little clips and pictures from the past. And so I got on there saying, "Hey, I'm at this address, and I heard it used to be a ballroom." Anyway, people showered me with all kinds of information.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. And this was, they had the Fitch Bay Orchestra playing there for oyster dinners in 1859 kind of thing. It's crazy. It's like such history in there. So
you should put some of those photos in the control room. I don't know if you thought about
I don't have any actual pictures. I have, but these clippings I have. And actually, you know what? In ripping up, I had to rip up the floorboards. So there were 2 layers of floorboards. Top one was a newer one, but below that was, the dance floor, and it was super brittle. It was tough to keep the boards intact. I have some, and I'm gonna definitely integrate them somehow, either shelves or whatever. But anyway, I found underneath the floorboard, actually it was broken up into a few places, but I pieced together a ticket from a grand ball in Hamilton Hall from what was it? It was like February 8th, 1862 or something. And
that's amazing.
I got that, so I'm gonna frame that for sure and put it up in the studio, right? It's crazy. Yeah, it's a lot of history in the house. I'm happy that there's something musical going on in there, because it's definitely in its
veins. Yeah, it's part of it. That's cool. That's really amazing. I have to say, like, I have so much respect for you for buying this property and then doing all these renovations and moving an hour and a half out of the city and continuing Seratone Studios, no matter, everything that's come your way. You're like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep working Seratone in Montreal. And you did it as long as you could. And then you keep it going away from the city. The utmost respect. I know it's not easy.
Thank you.
And it's, so in that vein, what is your secret? How have you been able to keep a studio running in the 21st century? Because I know from personal experience that it's hard. And something that I've heard many colleagues of mine say over the years,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've heard it too, is don't open a recording studio.
Yeah, for sure.
So
For sure.
what did you do right?
That's a tough question. I don't know. I think I had definitely some good word of mouth that worked for me. And I'd like to think that I'm a personable person and that people enjoy working with me. I like to make people feel
I can guarantee to
Thank
everyone
you. Thank
watching, you
you.
absolutely are. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that might be my strong point. I think I do good work too. You know, I put a lot of pride into what I do, and I'm efficient with my time too, in terms of it doesn't take me long to do these edits and cuts, and I pride myself on how fast I can click. You know,
Yeah.
might have given me carpal tunnel syndrome, but we'll see. I think that's more the construction. But I think that people always want to feel like they're getting their money's worth, and I've tried to keep my prices really competitive, and I've been raising them over the years, as you know, you have to match inflation. You can't be suffering. That's the way it goes. But I think that what's my secret? I think I don't have much of a secret, but what I would say is just do good work and be kind, and that's it. And people will recognize that, because there are assholes out there and there are big egos out there. And if you set yourself apart from them, then you'll probably get recognized as somebody that people want to work with again.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the second half of what you said is extremely important, that a lot of people who are in school might not necessarily realize, is that being a fun and good person to work with is almost
huge.
more important than the work you do.
Absolutely.
Some people will disagree with what I'm saying right now, but like being able to create that comfortable environment, especially for artists, they will come back.
Yeah. And I modeled that off of, and maybe unconsciously, but what I want when I go to a place, I want to be made to feel special. I want to laugh. I want to have a good time.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like that cliche saying of treat others how you want to be treated, right? It's just yeah. I think you're right. And I found that pop culture has turned a lot of people's egos into, you know, there's a lot of, you know, since rap music is kind of that's pop right now.
I'm the shit. Like,
yeah, I'm the shit.
Yeah.
Me, get mine, money, and like that's and it's slowly seeped into people's psyches, and that's a problem I find, because back in the day when Beatles were pop, or I don't know, I don't want to sound like such an old man, but you know what I mean. Like, basically, there used to be good messages in pop music. There used to be wholesome messages, and that's what, whether you like it or not, seeps into people's psyches and has a formative effect on who they are in a way. If you are immersed in pop culture, which a lot of young people are. So yeah, if you're following all this craze of rap and listening to the lyrics, and not to say that rap is bad, but I like to listen to rap that has good messages and positive, if not activistic lyrics, you know? So yeah, I think that's just the thing to keep in mind, is that, you know, a lot of people might be a bit misguided these days into thinking that, like, yeah, it is all about me, and it is all about, you know, getting rich fast. It's not really. It's the way things have gone. Hopefully pop music gets a little bit more hippy dippy.
Nice. Yeah.
Maybe we'll return.
I think it will. You know,
Maybe
it's always in waves.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah.
I guess before we wrap up the interview, if there's anyone who's watching this who wants to start their own recording studio, would you have any words of advice as someone who has started two?
I would say, don't try to niche yourself too much. Take everything that comes your way, at least at first, and then figure out what you enjoy doing. And you might find that you don't like human beings, maybe. You want to just edit and you want to have things sent to you. Maybe you're really into voiceovers. Maybe that'll open you up into saying, hey, what if I would do voiceovers? And then you get into that, but just do everything, try everything, and then you'll know. But it's also a good way to get more contracts, right? Because
for sure.
if you say, no, I only do rock music and that's what we are here, then you're going to miss out on a chunk of your livelihood, right? What if there's some kind of a singer-songwriter, super quiet folk stuff that you're just like, it's boring. Like, no, take it on. You'll probably learn something. Maybe you'll bring a little bit of rocky edge to their flavor, and yeah. So I would say just be as open as possible.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Simon, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Taking
Great
a
to see you.
chunk out of your day and doing this little podcast with me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thanks, man.